Okay, greetings and welcome to another Grenfell MediaWatch update. Today's edition I want to call Impact, Policies and Media Frenemies. Now when I say impact, the impact of Grenfell has spread all and up and down the UK, and last week I spoke about how it was going international. Well, let's take it a little bit closer, let's go to Glasgow. And in that region, what's happened is that the local council has actually done some research trying to find out which houses are at risk, and they've identified one, but they won't actually officially tell residents. So the official line is something in the lines of the public information is not out there yet, even though people know that they're living in death traps. Now MSPs, which are the politicians in Scotland, they've actually started saying that, look, we're going to pass legislation making it mandatory for all new tower blocks that are built to have fire sprinklers built into them. Now that is a positive and fantastic outcome, because it means even though in England the government here doesn't really give a damn about residents who live in social housing, at least around the world, even if it's just in Scotland, there's still some concern and still empathy to recognise that this cannot and should not ever happen again. Okay, on to processes. Now, some 500 people made requests for core participant status. Now, of course, Morbid can ignore all the contributions, because I have a suspicion that even though there are 500 requests, we're probably only going to get something like 50, if that, submissions from core participants admitted into the inquiry. So let's see how that one goes. What other process? The immigration process. This government has played shotgun over the lives of residents living in and around Grenfell, those who have been affected by it, sometimes offering an amnesty, sometimes not. And this time the government once again has done its flip-flopping and said that those who are so-called illegal, and I hate that term illegal because I don't understand how a human being can be an illegal human being. But putting that to one side, they're once again saying that they will have permanent stay subject to security checks. And of course, everyone understands the need for security checks when you're inviting someone into your home. But what I don't like is the way that this has been turned into some kind of political football. So I'm going to move on from this question about pseudo-permanent residency for migrants who are affected by Grenfell, and talk about residency for those who live in the UK and whose immigration status isn't in doubt. Now, this housing question has been going on for way too long. There's some 203 families that require homes, and so far Savage Javid has made a statement that 111 has accepted offers for accommodation. And again, it's the misuse of language. So if we get rid of all the doublespeak and we say, look, Javid, of the 203 families, of which 111 have accepted offers of housing, how many of that 111 have actually now moved in or have offers of permanent housing? Well, the answer then is not 111, it's not even 100, it's not even 70, it's not even 50, it's 10. 10 families out of the 203 have permanent housing. Rightly or wrongly, Grenfell is now starting to be covered up. But as I've always said, and I'll always repeat, we have to be mindful that as it is covered up, as it is physically moved out of public consciousness, just keep your eyes open. Open that the physical covering up of the Grenfell Towers only 4 months after the massacre took place isn't going to precede a political cover-up. The stakes are too high. But the last section of this update, I want to talk about media frenemies. Last week, I thought that the media did something that was very disingenuous. Many of us in our group were unimpressed. And I'm talking, of course, about the BBC Newsnight programme on the Grenfell baby. This is the story about how a baby was caught in a heroic rescue.
Do you remember that? The miracle of the baby thrown from the fire at Grenfell, an uplifting story on a bleak night. But we've heard little about that baby since the fire, so we've traced the story back to its origins to find out what really happened that evening.
I felt that what the BBC did was a process that someone has actually described to me now as gaslighting. It's a psychological term, apparently. And what the BBC did in forensically ripping to shred a communal narrative that was constructed to provide a a story of hope, kind of like the Robin of Loxwood story. There's elements of truth, but some of it is actually creatively curated to actually inspire other people to not give up. The BBC became what I would call a media frenemy. It deliberately used its resources in a way that was abusive to the Grenfell family and to survivors. And yes, there was a disclaimer about we're not trying to say that survivors were lying. We're not trying to say that this was a conscious, deceitful act. But what happened with that BBC Newsnight programme was that it started to plant seeds of doubt. It's kind of like a parent telling a child at a very young age, there is no tooth fairy. It's unnecessary. The truth will come out. There is actually a tooth fairy. The tooth fairy just happens to be the parent. So that's why I call that one Media Frenemies, because there are positive examples last week. There was an exhibition of unseen photos that took place in Well. I was highly suspicious, if I'm going to be honest, when I first read the story. Somebody going around Kensington taking photos, launching an exhibition, and it didn't sit well with me, but to their credit, they're not profiteering from it.
It almost felt shameful photographing it, but it was something that had to be done to keep it in people's minds. Otherwise, we all know how quickly news moves on.
But I've spoken about frenemies, so let's speak about media friends. Now, I wasn't able to attend the last silent watch that just took place, but I heard the turnout was fantastic. And I think that this is occurring because what we're seeing right now are other networks. I mean, I heard that the Radical Housing Network, for example, actually amplified the call out for solidarity, and what happened was that people from those networks joined the march. And this is a fantastic use of media, social media networks, something that state broadcasters just cannot achieve. And we need to continue to use the media in this way to keep the topic and the focus on justice for survivors and the families. So I think that's it. I think I'm done. So I'm going to close, as I always do, and ask, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.